Gary, from looking you up online, I know a big thing for you is not accepting the word no. And thank goodness, it seems like a lot of things have come your way by you continuing to push forward. When should someone actually accept that word? Is there a number of times?
Let's define our terms. I'm not sure that one should ever accept the word no. I really mean that. I once gave a talk, the title of which was "No is just a conversation starter." And that's really what I believe it to be. When someone says no to me, I haven't done my job. It's a clue. I should tell a more persuasive story, take a deeper cut, knock on more doors. There's something I'm not doing to get the yes. And they're helping me by saying you're not there yet. That's exactly how I view a no. In the film industry, your life is all about no. You get no's. Yeah, I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know. They've all experienced this. We all experience it. And at times it feels very harsh and personal and defeating. But I really don't, I don't want to waste my time feeling blue about people not lining up behind me. It just, every time I hear a no, it just incites me to push harder and be better and speak more crisply and authentically. So you can't say no. If I can be undeniable, that's my job. That's all of our job, is to tell people who we really are, why we really want what we want. It's not just a script, for God's sakes. This is a story that needs to be told. I'm the only one who can do it. This is why. This is the team I've assembled. Whatever it is. And my gosh, for every film that I've gotten produced, there are so many dead projects on the floor that ultimately did die. But if I took no for an answer, I'd never produce a film.
We've always heard that a hallmark of a great entrepreneur is being irritated by the fact that someone would tell them they can't do something because it lights a fire in them. Is there a way to do it without that negative sort of, oh, I'll show them? Or maybe that's a good thing.
I don't think it's negative. I'm a very stubborn individual. And I used to think that there were traits that I always thought, that could be negative, but it's not. A great friend of mine, a brilliant businessman, long ago, very successful, taught me that you need your PhD, pig-headed determination, right? And it's true. Well, there's a balance,
okay.
You know, because there can be, if you're driven that way, I mean, you shouldn't want to do a thing just to make other people wrong. You should want to do it because it's that important to you. You do have to listen. You have to understand the difference between valuable feedback or critique and someone who's just not getting the vision. And if you get, yeah, I get a lot of no's where I don't hear the no, but I do hear, oh my God, that was a great piece of insight. That was a great bit of advice. Or they so totally didn't see what I was getting at here, I better tweak that piece. So yeah, there's a lot of learning in there. But I don't think you stay stubborn just to be stubborn. I think it's because you really believe in something. And there are enough people who also see what you see that you're not just dreaming.
Gary, you've attached so many A-list talent names to all of your projects. For anyone looking to cast similar names, what are some of the things they need to know before they reach out to an agent or manager?
Well, the key, of course, is what's on the page, right? If actors generally, especially stars and their handlers, look at a role first and the story second. So the role has to be really well developed. I spend countless months, if not years, revising and working editorially with the writer to get the script just so. And I think when you feel that you've got something that's really just brilliant and that this is a role of a lifetime, now you're ready to go. And the question at that point is, how do you create a cause célèbre, and how do you get to those actors or their handlers to market it effectively to them? And I usually try and round up support on the fringes, right? You always want people echoing your point of view, who are closer to that person. One of the things that you want to do is first of all, you want to really research these actors and see who's available and who's not. What you don't want, you want to avoid, to the greatest extent possible, submitting it to someone where you're going to get a no because they're unavailable. But the agency's now looked at it, now they already know it's been rejected technically by one actor. So you want to kind of, preset the table knowing that someone's available, knowing that you can afford them. So you have to have sort of a framework. And then I try and engage people that are on their team, starting with assistants. I always do that. I always get a champion inside, whether it's the casting director's office, the agent's office, the manager's office, the publicist's office, the attorney's office, anybody's office. And I find out who's the friendly, warm one. And I get them talking amongst themselves. And I tell them what good is going on over here. And I create this sort of echo, and I do that in a few directions. But bottom line, the thing's going to speak for itself. The script is either going to light people up and they're going to go, oh my God, what a great story. What a perfect role for my client. Unless you know the actor personally, you are going to deal with all their handlers, right? Their representatives. And so you really have to be pretty straight ahead. I am very selective. I send them a script, once a year is frequent for me. So they know I'm very selective. When I send something, they read it carefully, and then we have a talk. When they reject it, if I think they're making a mistake, I will fight. I will go back to the agent, I'll go back to whoever's the friendliest in the group and say, I think we need to have a further conversation. In one case, the company passed, and I just simply said, I refuse to accept your pass. I pass on your pass. And I set up a face-to-face. That was my condition. Based on our rapport, I'm coming in for a face-to-face. Is that okay? And they said, of course. And in the room, I was able to convince them. And they actually turned around their point of view. And I got a green light for a $42 million film. So there's a level of persistence that's appropriate, but it's based on the nature of the conversation. If they see something that's intriguing, but they're just not up to it's a big risk for them to say yes, to put their star in it, or for the company to finance it, or whoever you're going after. So you have to know when to push and when to move on to the next candidate.
A common thing you'll hear when you call one of these agencies, sorry, so-and-so does not accept unsolicited manuscripts. How do you just send it anyway?
No. It's actually it's a real breach of etiquette to send any screenplay or intellectual property that's not welcomed. People generally will return it unopened, or they'll open it and then realize what it is and be upset. It's not a great way to set the table. And that's for legal reasons, right? So I never would submit something unless they said, please send it. But if they say no, it's either because they don't know you, and they'll say, have a representative send it. In which case, you can have anybody act as your rep. It could be an attorney. If you don't have an agent from CA, it's not the end of the world. You can have a lot of people, a young manager, find a manager, a lone wolf. Let them do it. That's the buffer. Or they may say sign a release, releasing us from liability, because we don't know you and we don't want to be sued. Sign the release. Your job is to get your material read. You want people to know your work, to know you as a creator. That's more important. So don't worry about, are they going to steal it? Very little gets stolen. Sign the release and send it.
So Gary, you say so much of the Hollywood fast track is about relationships. Very true. LA is a tough place to read people. A lot of people with hidden agendas. How do we know when it's okay to trust someone? How do they know it's okay to trust us? And you talk about the rule of three, but sometimes you're just in a casual setting. What type of sort of caution or due diligence should someone do when forming a partnership or relationship with someone that they don't really know that well? Maybe they've, interacted on social media a few times.
The good and the bad. There are a lot of people who profess to know more, or be better connected, or have more seniority than they really do. But we have Google. We have our ways of researching people, and if you can't find them online, that's a concerning thing, right? So you just look them up. And if you listen carefully and ask the right questions, and I believe asking the right questions is the key to, the kingdom, they'll reveal to you who they claim to know or have rapport with, and what they've done and haven't done, and so you can check those things out. That's number one. But the flip side of the coin is the old adage. I think it was Charlie Tremendous Jones, I forget, who said, We are the average of the 5 people that we're closest to in life. So the question is always, how do we continually up our game, elevate our relationships? And that's about targeting people that we want to be in association with, that we want to have rapport with. And so yes, it's okay to be out networking casually, socially, and going to events and seminars and all that sort of thing. But it never in lieu of that very intentional kind of networking, which says, I'm going to target people in each of these categories: representatives, agents, managers, lawyers, producers, casting directors, editors, cinematographers. By the way, everybody goes after the same people, producers and agents, right? Well, what about everybody else? The cinematographer sits in the center of the action on the set. The producer, the director, the stars all bow to this person during photography. He or she has great relationships. And they're sitting at home like the college professor waiting for the student to show up, and no one shows up. Wow. What if I want my script read by an award-winning cinematographer? Do they have relationships that could redound to my benefit? Do they know the actors that I want to get in touch with? Do they have representation? Of course they do. Could their agency help me? They're not used to being asked as much as producers and agents. So I say, play human billiards and go to the people who are least harassed, but could be really helpful. And maybe they're the perfect cinematographer for your film. It's not a big commitment to make. So there's a lot of ways, but I say, be careful, be cautious, be smart, use Google, know if someone is legit, but at the same time, really spend most of your energy targeting who you really do want to know.
So Gary, we had a question come in via Twitter from Natalia Galucci, and her Twitter handle is Evo Artists. And hello, Natalia, by the way. So she writes, we have a consider for our script which tackles gun violence. Any tips on how to get it produced? So what are the ways an unknown screenwriter can take their scripts and get them made?
Well, I'm not sure where that coverage comes from. That consider is, the first page of the coverage. All of the major agencies, all of the major studios, as a matter of practice, always have a script covered. They don't accept a script unless it goes through the story department, gets covered first before the executive or agent reads it. Those coverages are protected better than the Golden Fort Knox. They never get distributed. So number one, I'd be curious where that came from. But regardless, and by the way, consider is great because most of them get passed on in coverage form, right? So there's something good about that story. But I wouldn't use that as a tool. I don't think, unless you're willing to, unless you can show it and you can reveal where it came from and who created it, even if you could, I'm not sure it gets you anywhere, right? Because everyone has to form their own opinion. But what you can say is, I've gotten some very quality feedback from tried and true script analysts in Hollywood, from this company, from that. I'm not, going to bother you to read that, but it gives me confidence to approach you and say the following. We have spent, we've done 7 revisions, we've gotten a lot of great feedback. We're reaching out to you because your body of work, your artistic signature is exactly what we envisioned for this story. And we would really love, not you, have your development person read it. We are so confident of this. We're not going to tell you it's going to make $100 million. We're not telling you it's the first of a trilogy. We're not going to say silly things like that. But you're just really candid with them, and you say, you evidence the kinds of positive feedback that you've had, and leave it at that.
In general, if there's an unknown screenwriter, what are some of the ways to get their scripts produced? Not just one that already has a consider.
Well, I don't think it really matters. That's a great question. I don't think it really matters that much whether you're known or unknown. I mean, at the end of the day, a script is a roadmap, a blueprint for this other medium called film. But we're all 3 of us are equal judges, right? We're wired pretty much the same way emotionally. If we're moved by it, tears or laughter. If we're moved by the script, we're interested. If the roles intrigue us, if the characters intrigue us, we're interested. That's as true for an unknown. So the question is access, right? It's only about access. And the way you get a film produced is I think, really less about strategy and more about creative authenticity. The careers that I've seen jump off the start pad the fastest are the writers who said, I am going to write what I know, what I care about. I'm going to write a bizarrely unique story. The kind of story where people go, oh my God, that's different. They're not mimicking what's done, what they think is commercial, what they think people want to see. They just follow their own drummer. And the careers that I launched the most successfully were people who did just that. They were so different. It was such a unique voice that people went, oh my God. Now maybe that script didn't get produced, but they got hired for something else. Or it was their next script that got produced. But I think the big thing is dare to be different. Dare to write the story that actors are hungry for, that producers haven't read 10 times in the last month. Just be different. Be you. And whatever that is, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not saying be in the world of nonfiction, don't write your life story, but take the DNA, the heart, the guts, the feelings, and put it into your characters. Make it come alive, make it three-dimensional.
This is sort of a vague question, Gary, but what are the 3 steps to get started in Hollywood? In terms of, you remember coming from San Francisco, being in LA, I know you have your own story, but I think you got an office and you hired a secretary and you waited for the phone to ring.
Don't do that.
Okay, don't do that, right? Okay, it sounds like a very nice plan, but yeah. What are some of the steps in terms of, it could be as an actor, a filmmaker, a screenwriter, but you're just coming to Hollywood from somewhere else. It's total culture shock, even coming from the Bay Area where everything seems free and free love and wonderful. It's still culture shock. There's unwritten rules and what would you tell people?
My jaw hit the ground when I first arrived. I'm from San Francisco, and as night the day, this culture. And I really didn't know anybody. I didn't know how to navigate. I didn't know the business. Actually, I had a neighbor who was brilliantly successful. He became the chairman and CEO of Columbia Pictures Television. He was, at the time, running Norman Lear's company. Very smart, very funny, very brilliant guy. And he sent me into meetings at the highest level of all the major studios. And I wore my heavy wool San Francisco suits in the middle of hot summer, schwitzing, and I showed up and I had no idea what these people were talking about. And we made nice and I left. I thought, I'm unemployable, I have no idea. And what I did is, I don't really recommend this for people, but I joined an outdoor health club. And I played tennis all day long. Paddle tennis all afternoon, tennis in the morning for hours at a time, and everybody who came on the court, they were all in the entertainment business. And I would take them aside after a game and say, tell me about what you do. How do you do it? What are the job definitions? I'd have questions where I really needed the information. And eventually they became friends and they'd introduce me to other people and it just snowballed. My first 6 months, I made 100 friends just by being honest about where I wanted to go. I mean, you have to tell the universe what you want. And I said it repeatedly. And I tried to pick people who I thought were smart, who were well-mannered, who I thought had some success. Because if they don't know who you are at first, and you just disarm them, you find out, right? You ask the right questions, and you start to find out. And you use your gut, your heart, your better instrument to say, these people feel real. I don't think they're selling me on something, right? I don't know there's no perfect formula that's going to work for everybody. It's life. Life is very lifelike. I mean, you know, whether you're an actor, a screenwriter, whatever you are, a filmmaker. Someone once said to me a pretty funny thing, and it was this: if you have your laptop and you've got a few hours to spare, and you want to be productive, well, you could go to the local Starbucks. And all due respect to Starbucks, you can go to Starbucks, or you could be sitting in the first-class lounge at LAX, in American Airlines first-class lounge at LAX. Where do you want to be meeting people? So if you want to meet people who can help you, and it's all about relationship, it's all about making people, you know, the old adage is it's who you know, and that's marginally true. But underneath that is the truth, which is who feels that they really know you. And not only know you, but like you and trust you. And that's rapport building. where are you going to find the people that you want to invest in so that they come to know, like, and trust you and will actually open doors and be helpful for the right reasons? And so I would say, you know, there are charities, there's events, there's organizations, there's places where people who have been successful congregate. And you have to research that. And it's going to be different maybe for an actor than a writer. And if you're a writer, you're going to call the Writers Guild and say, what kind of mixers do you have? What events do you have? And you're going to go on chat rooms and you're going to find people who are really successful online. And you're going to follow them on Twitter. And it's the same thing. You're going to retweet them, you're going to acknowledge them, you're going to ask them a question, and after a few months, they're going to know your handle, you're going to be familiar. And eventually, you can, you know, there's so many different strategies, online, offline, but again, it's about intentionality. The thing that is the dividing line, and I'm sorry to give you such a long answer, the dividing line is this. Some people are just perceiving life as random and mysterious and hoping a good thing comes along. And others are saying, no, I'm going to go to the first class lounge and I'm going to go to search.twitter.com and find the top players. And I'm going to research them on Google and I'm going to learn where they're from. I'm going to learn so much information that they're going to think I was their neighbor growing up. That's cool. To me, it's about gamifying the business. People are a little intimidated by it. Turn it into a game. Make it fun. Be honest about it, but don't be intimidated about cold calling. Just say, how can I make this really interesting for the other person? How can I add value for the other person? And just because you're not a produced writer or actor or whatever it might be, never make the mistake of believing that you don't have value to contribute to that other person. It may be you find out that they have a child who is engaged in something you know something about. It may be that you're involved with the same charity they care about. It could be a lot of stuff. But there's always emotional currency and value to be given as a gift if you care enough.
Gary, I watched a video interview that you did where you talked about for a while you were in San Francisco, you had long flowing hair, and you were kind of a lost soul.
Back in the day.
You know, and it sounded actually very romantic and intriguing. What if someone's over 35, over 40, and they're sort of that wanderer, that lost soul, and they are having trouble harnessing these creative ideas? Because we know a lot of dreamers, and you talked about for a while you were that way, you were a dreamer and all these great ideas, but what a lot of dreamers seem to have is they don't harness those concrete ideas, they don't get them done. How do you fix that? Is that a matter of discipline?
You hit the word. I mean, there are people who are dreamers. I was a dreamer. I went to law school in part, not because I wanted to be an attorney, because I wanted to learn an adult language and a discipline and a framework where I could ground myself, because I really was quite a dreamer. And it worked. And I am very disciplined in my approach to stuff, which is, you know, I mean, it's one of the great paradoxes. Who wrote the book Flow and the book Creativity, who talks about the 10 paradoxes of the creative personality. And one of them is that you are you know, a creative person is all at once sort of playful and unstructured, and at the same time incredibly disciplined, right? They live in fantasy worlds, but they're really doggedly attached to, rooted in pragmatic reality. There are all these paradoxes. If someone's purely a dreamer, it's going to be tough, right? At some point, you either get so frustrated that you say, I need a plan, and I need to take Truby's course, I need to take McKee's course, I need to find some mentors, I need to invest X number of hours every day, or they're just never going to make any progress. I mean, that's the truth, they won't. So you get out of things what you put into them. We know that, we're taught that, and it's true. It takes hard work. I've read, you know, someone asked me, how are you so facile with story and restructuring story, working with writers and writing yourself and all that? And the truth is that this was about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I forget. And I realized at that time, I said conservatively, you know, could you figure out how many scripts you read? I realized it was over 10,000 scripts. Not all of which, obviously, but a number of which I had actually given notes on and rewritten with writers, or given notes on revisions. I had put in so many hours. They say mastery takes 10,000 hours. I don't know if that's actually mathematically true for everybody, but it's a right idea. The discipline to stay the course and say, you know what, I am going to commit to a daily practice that includes so much time toward becoming, fill in the blank, the screenwriter. Associate with other screenwriters, take courses, write X number of hours a day, read scripts X number of hours a day. I mean, just really live it, if it matters that much to you. In fairness, this is a big point. You talk about someone over 35 or 40. Doesn't matter. They say that Hollywood is ageist, and there's some truth to that. And I say, pay no mind. Who cares? When you submit a script, they don't know what you look like. They have no idea how old you are. They're reading a creative work. That's your issue, right? When you show up and they want to buy it, when you show up, believe me, if they really have a purpose behind their decision to buy it, they're going to buy it. You can do things independently. There's a lot of ways. I think that people stop themselves. But if they're 35 or 40 and they're dreaming, and they've been dreaming for 40 years, and they've never disciplined themselves, and they've never really practiced success principles, it's going to be tough.
So your rehab, so to speak, Gary's rehab for dreamers, would be get that daily practice, associate with other people of like mind, you know, watch material that you want to have made, things like that. It's an interesting thing because there's a lot of, quote, study groups and there's a lot of networking that I see go on, but I'm wondering sometimes how much work is really behind the scenes. You know, a lot of people on social media tweeting, and that's all great, but then I'm curious how much actual work gets done. And I think sometimes those dreamers, myself included, I fall into this category, get caught up in some of that other stuff, and then the real work doesn't get done.
I think many of us would agree that a lot of what we call networking, whether it's through social media or in person, is not the most productive time ever invested, that it can be a wormhole that really leads to no great value. And I had a very successful business, a friend of mine in real estate. Every year he comes up with a new tagline for that year, for himself, which I thought, that's interesting. So his tagline the other year, a year or two ago, was what was it? I'm sorry, it's taking me a second. Fewer bigger deals, fewer better people. And I thought, wonderful, he's really going against, he's swimming upstream, right? He's the salmon, he's going upstream. He's the one who's going against the trend of spending more and more hours in social media and so on and so forth. And it all happened because he lost his BlackBerry. And he lost all the data. And he decided that he only needed 6 people. That was it. With 6 great people in your life, all of whom are committed to helping each other realize their dream and using their Rolodex for the benefit of everybody in that circle. That was all you ever needed. And he's close. That sounds true to me, more than not. So I think this idea of like networking aimlessly, to know superficially, to walk home with a bunch of business cards from an event, I'm not sure how useful that is. My best results have always come from being very specific, very intentional, very purposeful in designing who it is that I want to know, going and meeting them, finding anyone who can help me meet those people. And it might be a type of person or it might be a specific individual. And I just do that repeatedly. So it's not that I'm a social guy. I like meeting people. I'm fascinated by people. Everybody has an amazing story. I want to hear it. But at the end of the day, in earnest, when I'm serious about my career, I can't interact consistently with 1,000 people or even 500 people, so I need to find those dozens, max, that I can interact with on a regular basis and go deep as opposed to having superficial exchanges.
You said the Facebook like is maybe not as big as we might
I think that stuff is overrated. I personally have no idea what a Facebook like is worth. I know it's widely debated, and some people think it's worth something, other people don't. It's a sliding scale. And that's a metaphor. I mean, it's literally true of that, but it's true for all social media. We're questioning all the old standard institutions, Arbitron, Nielsen, all the rating systems, the CPM model, the advertising agencies, the digital agencies, the media companies. Everybody's trying to redefine what constitutes a satisfying outcome. How do we measure that in today's world? And that's why dollars are trying to move off traditional media into other realms, and yet we're not really yet sure exactly how to measure it. So the transition's a little bit slower than it might be. I don't know the answer. You know, I mean, branded entertainment's a whole fascinating phenomenon, a huge opportunity and sandbox for people to creative people to get work and do stuff that's really cool. But at the end of the day, it's an experiment right now. And I think that's true for a lot of things. What would I say about social media as a business model? I think you have to know what your desired outcome is and use whichever platforms lead you there most efficiently. I believe in being very efficient with your time. I've just started using Instagram. I just, recently, and it's fabulous. The amount of feedback I get off that, the number of followers and whatnot, it's really quite stunning to me. I tend to use Twitter more than I use Facebook now. I find Twitter is more, the nature of the dialogue, the nature of that community and the conversation is much more appropriate to what I want to talk about and where I want to go. Facebook is a little bit sluggish, and it's more emotional, and it's more, where I want to deal in a world of ideas and shifts and changes and opportunities and creativity. And that's more Twitter for me. So I think you have to know what works for you.
Speaking of business model, which CEO principles do you try to emulate your own life or business plan after?
Wow, great question. There's a bunch of folks that I really admired. They're not all CEOs. Some of them are just thought leaders and authors. I think Seth Godin's brilliant. I think Malcolm Gladwell's brilliant. I think there are a lot of really smart folks out there. On the CEO level, I have to say, it's funny because I don't really appreciate the experience that much, but Howard Schultz at Starbucks, one of the great lines I've ever heard in an interview was when he said to Charlie Rose, what is this about going into the music business? Why are you selling CDs? And Howard Schultz looked at him and said, our customers have given us permission to extend our brand. I thought, that must be the single most genius line a CEO's ever uttered on television. And I think those innovators who say, well, this is, a coffee shop's always only ever been a coffee shop and all they do is serve coffee. That's the function. I don't see the world that way. I'm going to change the rules. Those are the people that I like. Those are the people who are, they just have an elliptical sort of creative intelligence that allows them to see opportunity where others aren't seeing it. And they're doing things a little bit differently. We're seeing it even in the auto, things as traditional as the auto industry.
Tesla. Yeah.
Tesla's an amazing, I drove my first Tesla the other day. It was an amazing experience, right? Oh my God. So yeah, there's a lot of people, I look at it not for how charismatic they are, or whether I like their personality, whether I like the sector they're in. I like to see people who cross lines, people who are disrupted in their thought process. We see it a lot in technology. Certainly I think Steve Jobs is, got to be one of those guys for me. I bought my first Apple in '83. I've never left since. I've always been loyal. Because I think part of the ethos of that community is we're really behaving differently because of what they've created. Pretty cool, pretty big.
Gary, I heard another video interview where you said, and I think I'm quoting you here, Pretty Woman was a disaster of a car wreck before we got it made.
It was. Every film is. It wasn't Pretty Woman. I'm not picking on Pretty Woman. Every film, goes down cul-de-sacs and goes off the rails and burns up in a disastrous set of flames. Every film gets rejected. Every film, the cast falls apart, the financing falls out, the distribution falls out again and again and again. The fastest I've ever gotten a script produced and on screen is 3 years, and that's considered super fast. Many films take a lot longer than that. So you can imagine how many problems. The stakes are really high. Every film is a startup. It's a business. It's a startup. So you've got the standalone business model where you say, the stakes are massively high because I'm spending 40, 20, $50 million. That doesn't include the marketing budget for the opening weekend. I'm bringing together 100, 200 people who've never worked together, and they must work together perfectly beginning day one because I've got a $100,000 a day burn rate. You're talking 30 languages. You've got bankers and insurers and bond people. You've got every creative department to talk to in their language. You've got the music people. You've got everything. And you've got to keep all this flowing quickly and beautifully in the same direction. And you're going to make this film where you're going to give the best away as a trailer for free and risk everything on an opening weekend these days. This is a crazy business model. No one should ever fund these things. But they get through because we have a big appetite for this, because it's powerful. So yeah, every film that I've ever produced died a few deaths, and there are many films that never came back to life. Pretty Woman, to actually answer your question, Pretty Woman was optioned to a company that went into bankruptcy, and just before it went into court, I grabbed it in a cash-out deal, or it would have been lost forever. The next company I optioned to also couldn't get it financed and made or cast. Richard Gere passed on the film a couple of times before we got it to Disney, and they made him an offer he couldn't refuse. I had Julia Roberts attached, but the studio didn't want her because she was an unknown at the time. And the timing to make everything meet in the middle is almost like a miracle when it finally gets to that point. And I think that in a way, I have this sort of Zen or romantic notion that you have to fail a lot. You have to bump into a lot of walls. You have to really figure out how to get this right. And that when you do, you'll get your film made.
Of the many films that you've been involved in, which one was your greatest teacher? Whether they were good lessons or lessons of regret?
They've all been great. Every film I've been associated with has taught me a lot. And by the way, truth be told, probably learned more from the films that didn't get made. Thinking back on why they didn't get made. What could I have done different? But of the films that got made, which are the ones people know a bit more, hopefully, I would say the Mothman Prophecies, which was another Richard Gere film, and there was one moment, one seminal moment, and again, that was a film that had been shopped all over town. Every company, independent, medium, big studio, all passed on it. I wasn't involved at the time. The agent shopped it. The writer I had produced before, I actually got to produce his first film. And he came to me and said, would you read this? And I fell in love with it. And then I learned it had been passed on. And I found there was one company, and only one company, that hadn't seen it. And that was Lakeshore, wonderful company. So I said, you know what, I will invest time in this, and I will take it to Lakeshore. And I knew that was it. There was literally one buyer in the whole world I could sell this to. So I went to them and they read it, 3 executives, and they called me the following Monday morning, typical Monday morning call, right? Brilliant story, we loved the craft, it was intriguing, based on a true story, oh my God, fascinating, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful responses from all of them. At which point one of them said, so thanks so much for sending it over, it's going to be a pass. Only in Hollywood. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm sorry, did you just say it's going to be a pass? All this laudatory language, and then you're dead. And there was a long pause because I knew this was it. This was the last man standing. There was no other option. And that was the company, I mentioned this earlier, that was the company, the moment when I said, I respectfully pass on your pass. And there was some nervous laughter. I said, look, of course you can pass, but based on our relationship and our respect for one another, I would ask you, before you make a final decision, let me just come in and talk to you. So I went to this meeting. I told these three executives the story of my relationship with my dad. Why? Because the script, when I read it initially, was so moving to me, because the character played by Richard Gere is so lost in grief after his beloved young wife dies. And a lot of what the texture of it was reminiscent to me of what I felt after my dad's death. He was my best friend. And to me, this film was a great film in its own right. It deserved to get made, and more importantly, it would be a private homage to my dad. And so I cared deeply about it. So I went into this meeting with three people who'd read it and said nice things about it, but passed on it. And so I felt the door was open just a little bit. And I never referenced the script. I never talked about the title. I just simply told him the story of my dad. I told him who my dad was. I told him about our friendship and our relationship and the love that we had, and what it was like when, unexpectedly, never having been sick, he just passed away, and what that was to my family and to me. And I just spent, not long, 12 minutes, 10 minutes telling him this story, at the end of which I simply said, I cannot imagine anyone, filmmaker, actor, audience, doesn't matter, who will not be moved. We're wired, whether we lost someone or not, we're wired to understand the tragedy and despair of losing someone so close to you. And they huddled and they changed their mind. Bottom line, they changed their mind. And we got to make this film. And it's a great film. It wasn't as big as Pretty Woman, but it was well received, and actually become more popular over the years. And I'm very proud of the film, but in a way, as a learning lesson, it's like, you know, we talked earlier about never take no for an answer. And I think what I came away from that was, if you are, you know, if you're ballsy enough, if you're bold and courageous enough, just to, it's like, get naked in public. If you're willing to get naked in public, people are impressed, right? Because we all know about vibration and frequency, and if you're like, you know, when you're deeply moved and you're in that very deeply authentic place, and there's no BS, we know it, it's real. That's very attractive to us, and that's what we want to put on a big screen. And that's what they got. They got why this is going to move the audience and therefore potentially be a success. And the film was successful as a business matter, but that's not, you know, I don't measure it in those terms. I just think, how do I get a yes from these people so I can do what I so desperately want to do as a creative person? And the only thing I could do is tell the truth. And it worked.
Gary, I'm curious why you turned to Kickstarter to self-publish your book. Why not go a more traditional route?
It was a process, actually. It was an educational learning curve for me. It took me a while to figure out that I didn't want a publisher, that I did want to self-publish, and the relevant reason primarily is I really wanted Manifest Destiny. I wanted to own my own intellectual property and not give it up and not be on a royalty basis with a publisher who wasn't going to market it anyway. I thought, you know what, I really, because I care deeply about what's in the book, it represents 25 years of my life. And I've always been in love with the storytellers, with the creatives, and I want to get this information out. So I thought if I own it, I'm more free to do that in more innovative ways. So number one, I thought I'm going to self-publish. The second step was then, how do you self-publish? It's a very fast-shifting landscape, this world of publishing, and it's every day, it's changing by the hour. And I thought about it, I thought, okay, I've decided some things that are good for me, and there's a lot of moving parts. So I thought, okay, I'm going to hire layout designers and people to e-format it and book cover design it, and I'm going to hire a printer and order a certain book run, and on and on. And there's a long laundry list, right? I thought, you know what? If I do all that, that's great. I'll have a beautiful book and no audience, and I have to start from zero. Then I thought, I started these conversations asking people about crowdsourcing, crowdfunding in particular, about Indiegogo, about Kickstarter, and I realized Kickstarter really was a phenomenal opportunity. Not just because, and the least of it was the fundraising. What was most interesting to me was I get this period of time over which to build a community. I get to find my brand evangelists. I get to really put my message out, almost serialize it, right, over time, and drive traffic from all quarters, from traditional media and my database and other people to this place called Kickstarter. And it's very dynamic. So this, to me, was the perfect community building opportunity. Pre-seed, just till the soil.
Right. How much pre-planning did you do before you launched the campaign, and what sources did you go to gather information on crowdfunding?
Well, I have my partner, Morgan, is very astute about social strategy, so she knew a fair amount about it to begin with. I did not. I had to sort of study from the beginning. But she brought me up to speed fairly quickly, and then we just asked a lot of people who we'd seen doing it that we had contacts to. And you just Google, and today, how do you learn? You Google, and you ask people, and you get on social media and you ask people. But it became very clear that Kickstarter was the platform that was the best fit for us. And I'll be honest with you, it's not quite as neat and clean as you would hope. You use your best judgment, you go with your gut, because I think your gut is your best guide for this kind of a social experience. It's not a sales job. It's got to be about something bigger than that. So it felt like if we were really vulnerable and honest and candid and committed to what we're doing and put that message out, whether it's the video or the copy or however we present, our ways of saying thank you, the perks that we put together, the people that we enrolled from my film industry community to be a part of that, if we created that as the ethos, the fabric of who we are and what we're doing, and we stayed true to that, how bad could we fail? So that's how we began, was just sort of seat of the pants. And we've learned so much every week, and it's only been 2 weeks into the campaign, we've learned so much.
Well, it looks like you're almost 80% funded or something, or you're very close to...
We're just 90% funded, and we're about halfway through. And now we just did a tweet-a-thon today, and we're getting some traditional media to drive traffic to it over the coming 10 days or week. And I think we're learning how to not sustain energy, but actually build it and create a bigger conversation and invite more people in. And what's interesting is how much people are ready to say yes. People really like to be part of this kind of open conversation about something they deeply care about. And they don't deeply care about it because it's necessarily screenwriting and they're not a screenwriter. It's about creativity. It's about seeing people realize, in this case, maybe it's even seeing me realize a dream of mine. There's something that really tugs at people about that, and it's cool.
Gary, your book that you have on Kickstarter right now, the campaign, The Writer's Guide to Hollywood, was it your idea or did a colleague suggest it to you?
No, it was my idea. It really evolved organically because before I was producing films, I was managing talent. I was a literary manager, writers, directors. And I was new. So I had to not only launch their careers, but I had to launch my own. And I didn't even consciously become aware until much later that I'd narrowed it down and carved out very specific strategies. Long story short, and then I collaborated with young writers all the years I was producing. Most of those films are written by first-timers. Over the years, people come and say, how do you break in? How do you get access? What do I do? There's a pathway for everybody except creative people, right? If you want to become a financial planner, or almost anything, there's a pathway. You get this school and you take an exam and you get a certificate and you join the mothership and you go, right? That doesn't exist for creatives. So I realized that I started counseling people, and then I started teaching teleseminars, which I didn't like, because you could only get the information out to some dozens of people at a time. You couldn't reach a big group. And there are a lot of people who want this information, so I thought out of self-interest and out of trying to help more people, I would just discipline myself, and finally I sat down and wrote the book of these strategies. And that's how it came to be.
So it sounds like you'd already begun the structure of the book a long time ago because you'd sort of honed these ideas about what it takes. Is that true, or did you sit down one night and just it all poured out into a book form?
It was hardly one night. I wish. No, the book is a distillation of all the practices that I used as a manager and as a producer, because it's really both. And then I started writing, and it took me almost a year to write the first rough draft of the manuscript and to figure out how to order it and make it really simple so that people could actually pick it up, read it, and say, I got what's in that chapter and I know tomorrow how to put it into practice.
What's the one takeaway you could tell us right now? I'm sure there's many things, but one of the sort of a teaser tip that you could give that's in the book if someone purchases it?
There are so many. I would say, to begin with, my mantra is relationships trump results. And oftentimes you see, especially screenwriters, they have been taught wrong, I believe. They've been taught to send out query letters that are kind of standard letters, impersonal letters, to people they've never had a rapport with, in hopes that someone's going to request their script, read it, discover them, and say yes. And while in the 80s that might have worked a bit better, it doesn't work so well today. And most writers will, say, no, that's not been successful as a strategy. So one of the key things in my book is how to make it fun, how to gamify, how to be successful at really getting in those doors through the telephone in a way that doesn't put the onus on the person on the other end of the phone, doesn't make them do too much for you too soon in the rapport building phase, right? There's the rule of three. You make 3 points of contact. I show you how to do it, exactly how to research it and set it up. It's really simple. It becomes fun. It's like a game. And if you finally realize that you're in control and you're equals, it gets a lot easier.
Thinking of the rule of three, in the age of social media, could someone tweet someone 3 times? Would that be sort of a way, or is that still sort of putting the onus on that other person?
It is a strategy, and it can work, but you can't tweet 3 times and then ask them on Twitter or on Facebook or any social platform to enter into a professional direct relationship. It's too public, it's not appropriate. You can build some rapport there, but then you have to echo that. You have to actually pick up the phone, call their office, speak to their assistant, introduce yourself as a living, breathing creature with a name and a face, so to speak, and make it mutual. Create a dialogue. You have to have a goodwill ambassador on the other end of the phone. And at that point, then, yes, the context is set.
And going back to social media, is it all right to, say, hey, look at my project, or is it better to engage this sort of person of interest with something of their own, book or film, instead of having it be about you?
Your goal is always self-interest, ultimately, right? Or you wouldn't be reaching out.
Sure.
The question is, how do you do it, and at what point in the relationship building process do you do it? If you come to me or I come to you, and the very first thing I do is say, here, will you read my book or my script or whatever it might be, you're an extremely busy person, as we all are today. That's a real challenge. But if I come to you and I say, I would like you to be my friend. First of all, I know your body of work. I know who you are. I've researched you. By the way, you went to the University of Virginia. I'm from Virginia. But you find some common ground. And you make it fun. You're charming. You use some humor. You're comfortable. And you're honest. And you say, look, I'm not a produced writer, but I so admire your body of work. Here are the 3 reasons I chose to call you. Would you be willing to give me 4.5 minutes to be my almost 5-minute mentor? I have one question that I really would appreciate your response to. No one will say no, because that's very flattering. It's honoring their wisdom, and it's very friendly. The quantum of work is over the second they finish their answer. The second time, ask maybe their advice, seek their counsel about whatever it might be. Certain kinds of projects in theory, right? Or what do you look for when you're looking for an entertainment attorney to represent a young writer? What would be the right questions for me to assess how good they are, and whether it's a good match? You can ask them, make up any question you want as long as it's relevant, and let them, again, that's a second time, right? And you've already spoken to their assistant a couple of times first. You always build that bridge first. Never rush through the assistant. You want to honor them because they're overworked, doggedly tired. They have a rough life. They're underpaid. They're underappreciated. If you come to them and show them respect first, they're going to, what? Speak well of you to the boss. And the boss listens to the assistant. I do. You've invested there. You've pulled that person out of all the competition to be your person, the face of your office, the voice of your office. So I try and enroll that person the same way, a couple of conversations. Keep it really short, 2 minutes. Is this a good time? If not, I'll call you back next Tuesday at 1 o'clock when your boss is at lunch. And you spend a couple of minutes with them. You research them and get a couple of questions in mind. And then you matriculate to the boss. And you're patient because what you're building are relationships, not going for the brass ring each time. So yeah, when I get to you, I ask you questions, and the rule of 3 for me is, the first time, we're strangers to one another. The second time, we're slightly familiar. By the third time, it's, oh, that's Karen, right? Now I can begin to walk over that bridge. But again, ask advice, honor them, make them your mentor, draw them. When you ask a question, our brains are wired very predictably. You take a step toward me, you need to come up with the answer. It's just the way we are. That brings you closer to me. Because I'm not asking anything. So when it does come time, I would rather give you, say, you know what, I have a script that I've really polished, I believe, and some feedback that I've gotten. You show that you're professional. I've gotten some feedback, 1 script analyst, 2 produced writers, and my Aunt Mary. And they've all said it really is well structured, the characters are engrossing, whatever you say. That said, they're not you. I would love your opinion. However, I don't want to ask you to take 2 hours of your time to read my script. I will send you the first 15 pages. If I haven't grabbed your interest by then, all bets are off, right? If I do, then you'll ask me for the balance. Is that fair? And all I want is some feedback. That's it. 5 minutes maximum. Because it will take them, what, less than 10 minutes to read 15 pages of a screenplay. And even spend a few minutes on the phone with you. So you're very mindful to ask for very, very small quantums of work, even after you've had your 3rd interaction. You build. It's like any relationship.